This episode is brought to you by North Texas Honda Dealers. North Texas Honda Dealers, they're here to help.
He has time, launches it to the end zone. Touchdown! Terrence Williams!
The throw goes to the right side for Crabtree. It's caught. He's going hard. Red Raiders.
Was he up the 10? Was he up the right sideline?
Yeah, he's got to go. He's tackled. Sam Houston wins it. The Bearcats capture their first FCS championship.
Hello and welcome to the only podcast for every non-FBS team in Texas. We're back and we're kicking off the 2023 season with our second annual mega preview show, which is going to include a realistic expectation for all 34 non-FBS teams. We're going to give you favorites for the Southland SWAC, UAC, LSC, ASC, SAA, SAC, and SWJCFC. In case you didn't know, that's every conference in the state of Texas that is non-FBS. I'm Cory Hogue, the non-FBS insider for Dave Campbell's Texas Football. You can find me on X, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Cory Hogue Sports, all one word, CoryHogue and sports. You can find my work at texasfootball.com. I am so happy to have joining me today Riley Zayas, who is quickly becoming one of the foremost experts in Division III athletics. Find Riley on X, Twitter at Zayas Riley. That's ZAYSRILEY, one word. In addition, Riley operates TrueToTheCrew.com, which is the source for everything Mary Hardin-Baylor athletics. Follow his work on X, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at TrueToTheCrew. All one word, TrueToTheCrew. And if you're a Crew fan, you already knew that. And check out his website, TrueToTheCrew.com. Riley, I am so excited to have you joining this podcast. I just feel like the listeners are really going to gain a lot from your expertise of the Division III level, and then you include some of my expertise with the FCS and the D2 and NAI, and I think we got this state covered now, man.
I think we'll make a good team. We both bring some different backgrounds to the table, but yeah, it's so cool for me to have the chance to talk about something I'm passionate about, which is promoting small college sports. I mean, you and I were talking a few minutes ago off air, but Texas has so much talent across the board, and that is certainly the case at the Division II, Division III, NAI, JUCO levels. It's such a cool opportunity to be on this show and just be able to cover small college football the last few years here in this great state.
It is, and we're going to do this, and we're going to look at, hey, if you've got interest in this, let us know. We're going to be reaching out.
Absolutely.
There's a possibility we continue this into basketball season. So for those of you who might want to hear some basketball talk once football starts to die down a little bit around November, December, look, basketball kicks up. And if you didn't know, we win national titles in this state in basketball too, Riley.
We certainly do. And we have a lot of, even as I look, I'm a pretty big basketball guy as well. And looking ahead to the 2023-24 season, there's a lot of national title contenders here in this state there, just practicing and getting ready to go. So yeah, we're going to have a lot to talk about, not only through football season, but also hopefully through basketball season as well.
Hey, and I think it's a great time. We're going to mention this a lot, but you said you are working on a book, which I think is fantastic. And tell us a little bit about kind of the process behind it, what you're looking at, and about how long it might be until we're able to get our hands on something like that.
Absolutely. A couple of years ago when I first walked into the Mayborn campus there where Mary Hardin-Baylor plays their basketball games, I was kind of struck by this feeling of, there's such a cool aspect of the Division III level. And, so many coaches choose to coach at this level. So many players choose to stay here when they have opportunities to go elsewhere to the other levels because it is a unique experience to be a Division III student athlete. To my knowledge and through a lot of research, no one has written a book on Division III basketball and kind of what it's like going through a season with some of these teams, the things that they go through and deal with, but also just what makes it unique and special. And so my goal is going to be to promote that, just like we're doing with this podcast, promote the small college element of things, and going to be doing that by traveling around the country throughout the next 2 years, actually, because I wasn't able to get it all within 1 year, but there's so many great rivalries, great historic programs, playing at Division III level across the country. And so that's really going to be the main element of the book, if you will, is just to go through and talk about some of these. Hope Calvin has one of the longest standing rivalries in all of college basketball, regardless of level. And so it's going to be experiences like that, talking with some of these coaches and saying, okay, what makes people love Division III? And again, it's no secret that they're going to be playing in front of smaller crowds and smaller venues, but there is such a cool connection that you have as the reader and just as a fan with those teams and with the Division III level. And so, yeah, that's going to be the whole goal of the book. Hopefully within a couple of years, probably, like I said, 2 years of research, and then, we're going to be working on it as we go along. And so hopefully here in a couple of years, we'll be publishing the book and be able to promote it that way. So I'll be promoting it throughout as I collect my research. So stay tuned and follow me for that.
Yeah, no, that is awesome. And we got a little head start last year. We were
Right,
both at the
right.
women's Final Four. It was held at the American Airlines Center. And yes, it wasn't the 16,000 or whatever the full house was for Division I. But you know what? On that Saturday, there were good crowds for both D3 and D2. And those games were early afternoon. And they had quite a showing, and they put on a good show out there for us too.
They certainly did. That was a world-class experience, and talking with the players and the coaches there, I mean, it gave so much validity to them as, Division II and Division III student athletes. And, I know a lot of people were talking about it afterwards saying we need to do this more. So hopefully the NCAA maybe takes that cue a little bit. And I think right now they've been doing it every 7 years. Maybe we could get it to every 5, or every 4, and give, every student athlete that opportunity, within their time in college to possibly play in an atmosphere like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. So look, if anyone's ever listened to me, I have a tendency to go off script. And so I try to keep myself limited, and it is football season, Riley. We are in the week 0. There will be junior college football across the state of Texas, and one other scrimmage is happening, a few other scrimmage, but one NAIA scrimmage. Texas Wesleyan is having a scrimmage against an opponent. They're able to do that at that level, which I think is great. But we're going to get real game action this week, starting Thursday in the junior college level, and we're going to break it all down right here. We're going to start with the Southland Conference, where I think, Riley, from the start, it's two favorites. I think you've got UIW, Southeastern, and whoever wins that game head-to-head is going to have a huge edge in the conference this year.
Oh, for sure. And that's going to be one of those games we talk about across, the state of Texas. And you even look at games like Mary Hardin-Baylor, Hardin-Simmons every year, Trinity, Birmingham Southern. But this is certainly one of those games where a single game can decide the entire outcome of the conference and who wins that title. Because when you look at it on paper, it's just so hard to figure out which one of those teams is even going to be the favorite entering that matchup, because I really think it's going to have to be a wait and see approach to see how these teams open their seasons, because there's so much talent on both rosters, and it's really making for an exciting anticipation leading up to that one.
I've got a piece coming out later today on it. By the way, we're recording on Monday, so this will probably get released either a later Monday or on a Tuesday on TexasFootball.com. Got a piece coming up on UIW starting quarterback. They have named Zach Calzada the starting quarterback. That was done Saturday at their media day. And I wrote a piece about how he is the guy. He's not Cameron Ward. All right. And he is not, He's not going to be your Lindsey Scott Jr. He's not going to run the ball. He's not your dual threat guy. But what he brings you is a passing attack, a stability there. But man, don't forget, Lindsey Scott Jr. threw for over 4,000 yards last year. He has an offensive line, right? They protected him pretty well to throw for that. So they're not going to need Calzada's feet. I think what he brings is he has dealt with expectations. He was a top 20 quarterback consensus coming out of high school, 3-star out of Georgia. You know, he played at Texas A&M. He started at Texas A&M. He beat Alabama, Riley, for crying out loud. This guy, this guy's coming in with wins against Alabama. You know, he led them to a comeback win over Colorado the first time he stepped on the field when Haynes King got injured. So this guy's had the expectations. He's done this at the highest level. He's also dealt with some things, right? He had a shoulder injury that he suffered against Auburn, transferred to Auburn, and then needed another surgery. That's why he didn't play. Everybody thought he was washed up. It's more of a health thing. So if Zach Calzada can stay healthy, I think this UIW offense is just going to keep humming.
When they landed him as a transfer in late December, I think a lot of people, especially within the circles of the media here in Texas, really thought this is the guy. And as it turns out, he's going to be as they enter their season. You know, you look at guys like this sometimes who come off of seasons where they really couldn't play, and it does something to you where it makes you that much more thankful when you actually get the chance to get back out on the field. It also, I think, you know, increases that hunger just to have the opportunity again. You know, as you mentioned, Cory, he had the opportunity to start at A&M, and he knows what it feels like to be that guy who's leading a team to a lot of success every Saturday. And so I think if he can come back after last season and kind of what he dealt with was his shoulder injuries, he'll be a really key part of that offense. And he's going to need to be, because, you know, Incarnate Ward, they obviously lose some guys, both to the portal and just to graduation. But, you know, I think there's a lot to like about this offense, starting with Zach Calzada.
Yeah, and he is outstanding. And then if there's a reason why there were 3 FBS quarterbacks fighting to be the starter at UIW this year, and you also have Richard Torres, who started at Nebraska as a backup right there. So if something were to be unfortunate, and gosh, we hope not, man. Calzada's been through so much. I just want to see that kid succeed. But if something were to happen, Clint Killough, at 30 years old, head coach, he is a UIW guy. He's been a part of this building the program from Eric Morris. And so I think he knew we got to have enough people. Like, if you're just dependent on one quarterback, injuries happen. It's called football. And so having that competition, number one, is important. And number two, having that security behind, because you don't want the whole season to go south just because of a quarterback injury.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the depth there is really important. You mentioned Torres, and a guy who, again, Nebraska is a Power 5 school. He has that experience. And I think when you look at players and guys who are going to come into roles like this, especially going from the FBS to FCS levels, the one thing you always want to look for is experience. It's one thing to just be on the roster. It's another thing to play and see that playing time and see what it's like, in Torres' case, to go up against the Big Ten, defense. Yeah, I think you look at it too. The crazy thing, Cory, I know you wrote this in your piece in the magazine this fall, but UIW's had 3 head coaches in the last 3 years. Like, you don't see programs go through that and continue to have the success year after year that they have. But it just goes to show you how much talent they have, not only within their players but their coaches. Obviously, GJ Kinn goes to Texas State, and immediately they have a very high quality replacement for him, a guy who's going to have a lot of success, I think, in this program.
I think so too. He's been there. I think the key is on this one. He's been Eric Morris, a young coach, came to San Antonio. He was at Texas Tech as an assistant before that. Man, they caught lightning in a bottle with him. He came in and set the foundation, built the program. And when I talked to Clint Killough, of course, again, GJ Kinney, man, what he did last year, he gets it. He is an impressive coach. Amazing. And so the 2 previous head coaches are now coaching Power 5 teams in Texas. I don't know that eventually, maybe, but right now, I think Clint Killough is just, he's the guy. And I think he knows that this is not just a 1-year thing. And when I talked to him in the offseason, he said, look, we built this up from the ground. Those guys who we brought in that were freshmen, they're now hitting their seniors. They're now becoming graduates. They've got a COVID year that they can use, a lot of them. So you're seeing that depth. And then he said, we just replaced transfer with transfer. Granted, a lot of transfers. I think they brought in about 28 of them, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
That's a lot of transfers. But you're just replacing transfer for transfer. That seems to be the way college football is. I think that foundation they built is where we're going to start to see UIW take off this year. And so, Riley, I would say we're going to give a realistic expectation. I think it's realistic for UIW to say they start at the top. I think their floor, though, is probably the middle this year.
I would agree. I think maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic on them in terms of that. I definitely think that they're going to be a top 3 team in the Southland. You know, it's tough when you, because I just want to point out, as you mentioned too, when you have a guy who's been in the program, it's different than bringing someone who's coming from a completely different program, trying to come in and change the culture. He, Clint Killough knows how to run this program. He knows how to recruit here. Those are the big things. And I think the one thing I do like with the transfers is that there's so much experience on the roster, that these are guys who know how to win. And in some of these tight game situations, like they're going to find themselves in, I don't think they're going to be blowing anybody out, but I definitely think a realistic expectation is a top 3 finish in the Southland this year.
Oh, yeah, I definitely think so. So now we're going to get to a few other teams. Every other Texas team in the Southland has a new head coach this year. In fact, all 4 teams in the Southland Conference have a brand new head coach if you're in the state of Texas this year. You don't see that very often, and they're all for different reasons. Just about, there's a couple, and we're gonna get into them here. Starting right off the top, we're gonna go Houston Christian, and their new head coach is a guy that you're very familiar with. He's got ties to Mary Hardin-Baylor. He's got ties to Howard Payne. He knows how to build a program. Braxton Harris is the right guy at a program that if they do a couple of things and if things start to kind of break right, they get rid of the CVS, they start getting rid of some of these things that FCS fans can rag on them about, and then they start winning on that football field as well. This team, they're in a location, and they have a head coach and a coaching staff, by the way, very young and very enthusiastic. They could be a problem in the Southland Conference pretty quick.
I would 100% agree with that. I had the chance to talk with Braxton a couple of months ago, actually. And one of the things that you pointed out was Houston is such a great recruiting base, and they really want to tap into that. They're focused, they know that they can go out and recruit a bunch of different places, but right there in Houston, they want to be sure to recruit those guys to a high level because there is so much talent there with the high school programs. And I would even contend, Cory, that there might not be a better recruiter in the Southland Conference than that staff at Houston Christian, starting with Braxton Harris. And you just look, what he did at Campbell and how he completely, multiple top 5, top 10 FCS recruiting classes there. He obviously Howard Payne was a tough job to take over, but he did recruit some talented guys there as well. He knows how to recruit. And so it might take a little while for us to see the results in the field. But once he can get in a few of these recruiting classes, I think we're going to start to see a different Houston Christian team than we've been used to seeing the last few years.
I think you're right. His track record at Howard Payne took a couple years, then all of a sudden he had winning records, right? He had 500 records. He goes to Campbell. Campbell was not on anyone's radar for football at all, and all of a sudden they're top 5, top 10 recruiting classes. He comes to Houston Christian, and I don't know if you've noticed yet, but man, in 2024, they've already got a couple 3-stars lined up for 24. They are building it. This year, I'm going to say they're probably worst case bottom of the conference, which is kind of where they're going to start anyway. I think that we could see them, if everything breaks right, healthy, look, health is going to be the key for them. And it's going to be the key for all three of these teams we talk about that's remaining in the Southland, because there's just not a lot of depth at any of these programs yet. So they're going to need to be healthy. But I think Houston Christian, if healthy, could surprise some people and may find themselves up towards the middle of the Southland this year.
I would agree. Going through their schedule, I think you can probably find a spot where if things break the right way for them, they end up with a 4-win season potentially. That's a big step for a program that won only one game last year and didn't win a home game. It's going to be small steps, I think, this year. But if they can, again, in some of those situations, the depth is a bit concerning, especially when you get into the second half against some of these teams that are really physical in the Southland. But I think if things go the right way for them, they can keep their roster healthy. We can see them trending towards the middle, and I think a lot of people can see what's on the horizon after that.
I think so too, man. We head over to Lamar down in Beaumont, Texas, where Peter Rosamondo has taken over a program that no one knows exactly why they're not better than they are all the time. Like, they've got a recruiting area, they've got a beautiful stadium, they've got a lot. It seems now, Riley, they've got the administration aligned. They've got a president, an athletic director, and now a head coach that is positivity exemplified. He understands about the little things. Again, man, he's very impressive with this. It's tough though, man. Lamar is just a tough place to be. I think this year, I think I think they're a bottom of the team this year. I think they're going to need a lot to go right to get to middle. It is possible, though, and I'll tell you why. They weren't devoid of talent at Lamar, right? When I watched Lamar, I didn't understand why they didn't win more games last year, because you could see talent on the offense, on the defense. The offensive line's an issue. They're addressing some of that. But they do have some talent there. And I think with the mentality that Rosamondo has brought already, I think we're going to see an improved Lamar squad, and those pre-snap penalties and lack of discipline penalties, I think those are going away as well. And I expect the Cardinals to win a few more games this year.
Agreed. And you talk about Houston Christian having a young, very enthusiastic coaching staff. Lamar strikes me as a very similar situation in some of the guys that he's brought in there. The offensive line was a big concern last year, and may still be a little bit of an Achilles heel for them. The one thing is, though, you look at some of the playmakers they have, guys like Tyler Jackson on defense, Kalon Griffin on the offensive side of the ball. There's a lot of playmakers there, and guys who, if they can get the ball in their hands, especially offensively, can make a play. But it's going to take enough cohesion and chemistry with the entire working offense, entire working defense, to make some of those things happen. I think they probably end up as a bottom tier team in the Southland this year. But again, there's a lot of optimism there that if they can bring in some of these recruiting classes, allow some of these sophomores this year to get that game experience, we could see them trending up towards the middle in the next couple of years.
I think so. And if they can win a few games and kind of do a little better than expected this year and start to get some of those people on board in Beaumont, man, the sky could be the limit for Rosamondo and the Cardinals there. Ooh, now we go to Commerce, man. And I have a love of Texas A&M Commerce, the 2017 national champions in Division II. What a great story. But, man, they're in FCS now, and this is year 2 of transition. Year 1 went surprisingly well. It went as well as I think they could have expected. Then we've had a complete change almost at Texas A&M Commerce. You got David Bailiff did not come to an agreement with a contract. You have a new athletic director there, and you have a new head coach in Clint Dozel. And look, Dozel is a guy who brings titles with him. He was an arena football coach with the Philadelphia Soul. He has won titles and won games everywhere he's been. There's not that much difference between the arena football and the 11-man football. A lot of the concepts, and this is something for those who haven't heard or haven't read yet, Dozel, his cousin, is Dan Campbell, the head coach of Detroit. And so he was on staff with Sean Payton at New Orleans for years down there, and Dozel went to their training camps quite often. and they went over some of those passing concepts. A lot of the concepts you see run passing game wise in the NFL comes from the arena football, and more specifically Clint Dozel, right? He's had that kind of a thing. So we know he's a good coach. I'm worried right now. I know that their defensive staff is back. They've got a defense, but man, I look at that schedule, and for a team that does not have a full set of scholarships yet, they haven't built the depth at FCS. Man, it is brutal. And my big concern right now with them is whether they can stay healthy enough at all when it comes conference time, because this non-conference, man. And again, okay, I got to say this. This is one of those things. This is a little disclaimer for those who want to put the whole schedule on the prior AD and Tim McMurray. Don't do that, right? I spoke with Tim during the summer. He told me he had every game set up except one. All right. And that one, he was trying to get an NAIA kind of a bye game. The other AD came in and set up Old Dominion. That's tough. You know, you could get a bye game, instead you get Old Dominion. I understand. But for a coach in his first year, a program going through their second season of transition, man, that seems like a stacked deck.
Yeah, and I don't mean to give too much to the magazine, but if you haven't picked one up, you need to pick it up. You have a good piece in there, Cory, about this whole thing. But I believe Dozel had said that they're not getting money to play Old Dominion, which is normally the case. Mm-hmm. And so you factor that in too. It's like, okay, well, this isn't even anywhere close to what we wanted. To be honest, when you look at the roster that comes back and some of those guys, they do lack depth. I think there's some talent there, especially on the defensive side of the ball, but the schedule is just so tough. I mean, you go from a schedule that they had last year where it was very winnable, some very winnable games. That's what you'd expect to have a team in transition. Now they go to 10 FCS opponents, obviously, then Old Dominion, that one FBS opponent. UC Davis is a top 20 FCS team. You know, they opened the season with them. It's going to be a really, really uphill battle for Texas A&M Commerce. And so I think that's why, you know, I see them as a bottom team in the Southland, just because they're going to play a really tough schedule, and they probably aren't ready to play that schedule. Not because they don't have enough talent on the roster, just because of the point where they're at in the transition process. They're not built right now to play a full FCS schedule like other teams who are more established at this level in the division.
I'm with you. Look, last year they had one of the best defenses in FCS. Statistically, they had one of the top defenses in FCS. I think that defense is still middle to top FCS, but overall as a team, I'm going to put them right on that middle edge, but they're really teetering to bottom, in my opinion, to start this year. And you know, I'm hopeful for the best, and I know that Dozel is a tremendous coach. And one thing I do know about the Lions is they're going to fight. They're going to put out everything they can every week. They're going to fight. Year two is always the hardest year of transition, from what I've told from coaches who have done this. And so I expect this year to be a tough year for the Lions, but keep faith. Good days are ahead for that program. With that, Riley, we move over to the SWAC. We're going to the Southwestern Athletic Conference, where the conference favorites, no surprise, Jackson State and Florida A&M, the Tigers and Rattlers, are the favorites. But I got to tell you, man, in the West, when you look at the SWAC West, you have a whole group of teams that, to me, are pretty darn even. Southern, Prairie View, Texas Southern is in the conversation now. You have a really wide open West division, and the winner of that, it's not Deion Sanders anymore at Jackson State. Florida A&M doesn't have one of the best defensive players in the whole world right now. I think this could be a year the West comes in and gets a title.
I mean, the door's wide open, for one of these teams to come in and kind of seize the opportunity. There's a lot to like about, both Prairie View, A&M, and Texas Southern. What's crazy is we're talking about Texas Southern, being competitive for that West title, and yet they haven't had a winning season since 2000. But it's certainly a notable thing to look at it and say, well, there's a lot of parity here. There's a lot of talent, and there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about both Prairie View and Texas Southern's, best case scenario for this 2023 season.
Definitely. And we're going to start with Prairie View. And look, first off, Riley, just going to give this away. Next week, when we come in with our week 1 preview episode, right? Cory is headed to the Labor Day Classic this year. I am going to be in Houston, Prairie View, Texas Southern. I will be there. That game is huge for both teams. It gives you a leg up to start that conference race. Texas Southern, Andrew Body, we'll get there in a second, but we're talking about Prairie View. And when you talk about Prairie View, you're talking about a team that didn't quite reach where they should have last year, talent-wise. A lot of that was inconsistency. And Bubba McDowell is looking for that consistency this year. And it was interesting. I want to just a little inside baseball. When I talked to him for the magazine, he told me that he was probably going to rework his entire defensive backfield in the summer in the transfer portal. And that man did not lie. He went in and got a whole new defensive backfield. I think he's feeling better about this. And so I'm going to put the Panthers, I'm going to say they're at the top, but if they're inconsistent again, they haven't solved it, they're going to go to the middle very quick, especially in a league, in a division with so much parity.
I come to the same assessment. I think, I really, really like when you sit down and you look at what they bring to the table with the transfer this summer. You got a guy like Caleb Johnson who comes in as a running back from Mississippi Valley State, who obviously has been proven to have success in the past. There's a lot of things to like with the experience on this roster, guys who really know, again, how to win, how to compete. That's invaluable right now, especially in the era of college football where we're seeing so many guys in the transfer portal, people moving around. It's really notable to be able to bring in and have a bunch of guys who, whether they played at Prairie View or they played other places, they have experience and know what it feels like to have success. But again, they struggled to finish a lot last year. They struggled with those inconsistencies, especially late in games. That hurt them quite a bit. I think, if they can figure that out and win some of those games they lost last year because of miscues here or there, we could see a very, very successful season for Prairie View. And I think, the ceiling is obviously them winning that West title and finding a way to put some of these wins together. But again, the other thing too with the Labor Day Classic, you talk about, it's going to be a fantastic game. It's interesting to have one of your bigger games just from a rivalry standpoint in week 1. Talk about getting into it right away. Like, these teams are going to have to bring their best, Texas Southern especially, who we're going to talk about in a second, right off the bat. And that's going to be really interesting to follow that game and see how both teams kind of approach it, I guess, based on the way last year played out and all of that.
The great thing is they do this almost every year. Almost every year they meet right around Labor Day. There have been times throughout the rivalry that it hasn't, but it's always been right around like week 1, which makes it that much more thrilling because you really don't know about each other, right? You don't have tape or any of that. But what you do have, you have a Prairie View A&M team. We know they're good. We got a Texas Southern team that we would never have said this a few years ago. There is a chance that they could win the West Division. There is a realistic chance that Texas Southern, what Clarence McKinney has done there is just incredible. He is big on this offensive line. This offensive line came in, most of them started as freshmen. They are no longer freshmen now. And I got to tell you, man, I think he's going to be outstanding with it. I think that Andrew Body, now that he's a junior, we know how dynamic Andrew is as a quarterback on the field. I think I'm going to put Texas Southern in the middle to start with, just because I'm more of a prove it to me guy this year when it comes to these teams. Last year, I was more of a I believe in you. This year, I'm more prove it. So I'm starting them in the middle, but this is a team that could win the West Division.
That's fair, and I think we'll find out real quick kind of what this Texas Southern team looks like, some of the pieces that they brought in. But even look at a guy like Michael Akins, who's down there as their defensive end, fantastic last year as a rusher. You know, we're going to see some of these guys, I think, who took steps last year. Andrew Body is another one. Take a bigger step, I think, and establish their names a little bit more within this conference, which will be exciting for that program. They obviously, as you alluded to, Cory, haven't had a ton of success for quite a while, but this seems like the year where it's all coming together at the right time. You know, you have the experience, you have the talent, and you have a wide open West Division. Like it all lines up well for Texas Southern to really make a run this year. But I would also start them in the middle and see kind of how those first few weeks play out before elevating them to the top, if you will.
I agree. And I think week 1 is going to tell a lot because McKinney's really, really happy. He thinks the receiver core is a lot better than it was last year. And if they can provide some hands, catch the ball, Andrew Body, if he's given some time, and even when he's not, he can make a play happen.
Yeah.
I think we could see Texas Southern do outstanding things. It is time to head over to the United Athletic Conference, the conference that is, we're just going to say, run by Oliver Luck. They don't call him commissioner, right? The executive director, whatever they want to call it, whatever the title is. Oliver Luck is there. You have the combination of the ASUN and WAC. And so you've got conference favorites, and you talk about a wide open conference, and you talk about a tough conference. Favorites this year: Eastern Kentucky, Austin Peay, Central Arkansas, Stephen F. Austin, and Abilene Christian. Literally, Riley, any of those 5 could win the conference title in the automatic bid to the FCS playoffs.
That's what makes it so exciting, right? When you enter some of these, conference races where we're sitting here in the preseason and saying there are 5 or even, in some cases, 6 teams that have a shot at this. I think the other thing that's going to be interesting is that it's such a national conference. I don't know if people necessarily realize until they actually look at a map. You have all across, the country, from Eastern Kentucky, obviously down here to the Texas schools. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see how these teams handle, number one, the travel, but also just, the dynamic of being in a new conference and all of that. But yeah, there's a lot to be excited about when you have so many teams with the talent capable of winning the conference title.
And they got my excitement moving early when they had Media Day, July 14th at Texas Live, because that is the best idea I have heard of anyone so far. I'm a big fan of Media Day at Texas Live, and hopefully we could get a lot of people there and run a big show from it next year. That's kind of the hope right now. We keep going there. We're going to start with Abilene Christian, the Wildcats. Keith Patterson, second year, his first season was a massive success. They played for a WAC title. That is not something anyone expected in Abilene. And that's just a precursor to what Patterson wants to build there. The thing is, I still, year 2, we still talk about depth. That is a real concern at Abilene Christian. They got a lot more transfers in. Maverick McIver has done well. Scrimmages have gone well. I think they have the talent. They're going to need the health. I say if they remain healthy, they're at the top of the conference fighting for one of those spots. For a playoff spot. We could see the Wildcats. I see probably worse, best case scenario, conference title. I could also see them have a playoff berth and at-large berth. If things don't break well, I think they end up, at worst, they're probably middle if they have a lot of injuries and the season goes south.
Yeah, and I think, again, you bring up the depth, and that's obviously something they tried to correct a little bit. I mean, they went out and they had, when they announced their signing day class, they had 5 of their 7 transfers were from the Power 5 level. They've obviously, I think, gone out and gotten a few more over the course of the summer. We're not always sure how some of those guys are going to fit in, especially guys who didn't really see a lot of playing time at their previous schools. But I think you do look at some of these returning, guys, and, a guy like Maverick McIver, who was really talented, last year. And I think when you start to look at this Abilene Christian team, one thing that sticks out is that they have some playmakers on both sides of the ball who have an ability, I think, to make plays on their own, but also get everyone else involved. They're good leaders. That's one of the things that stuck out to me watching them a little bit last year. Yeah, I think this is a team that if everything breaks right, they can finish at the top of the league. They went 3-1 last year, in conference play, and obviously this year it'll be a little bit of a different schedule, some different challenges. They play some bigger schools, some FBS schools in non-conference. But when you start to look at what their schedule is going to look like in conference, I think this is a very winnable schedule for Abilene Christian.
Watch the defensive line, Riley.
Yeah.
That's where, if that defensive line is bigger and better and deeper, I think that could be the key. That was one area last year, one area that Patterson focused on. He knew they needed more depth and more size on the offensive line. A team that should be there. We're not talking about health. We're not talking about depth. We're talking about a team that should be at the top, should be challenging for an at-large playoff berth at worst and the conference title. That's Stephen F. Austin. Now, Colby, I love you. I'm not trying to place too high expectations on you. I'm not saying you're top 10 in the country. I don't believe Stephen F. Austin is there. There are question marks this year. Again, another new defensive coordinator, a lot of new staff, not as much staff. And I think the reports coming out of there are that they're fitting together better as a unit this year. And for a team that overcame all those other challenges last year to win the WAC, if they don't start with some of those challenges, winning the ASUN is definitely a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, and that's I think a very reasonable expectation when you look at number one what they did last year. I mean, they're the reigning WAC champs, but you also look and say, okay, you talk about coming together and bringing guys. The experience in this roster, I think, is what makes me and some others really excited to watch this team because they have played together, and I think that's a big element. When you have guys who have worked together and done that over the years, they'll play some big games, and they'll get a team like Eastern Kentucky, at home November 18th to close the season. That's going to be a big one for them, I think. And I think that's one to circle on your calendar if you're looking at big games, because there's a good chance that it could come down to a game like that for Stephen F. Austin to really claim this title. But I think they're going to be in the hunt the whole way through. And yeah, there's high expectations there for SFA.
Speaking of high expectations, we move on to Stephenville, Texas, where expectations are enormous every single year. And that happens when you have a 24,000 seat stadium that you've just completely redone over the last few years. The expectations are high. There are a lot of people unhappy, or some people, not a lot, some people unhappy with the fact that they have been one of only just a few teams, including North Dakota State, if you've ever heard of them in the FCS level. Tarleton's one of the few teams, along with them, to have posted a winning record through the first 3 years of transition. What Todd Whitten has done is incredible. It is amazing. He believes he has his deepest team yet. He believes he has his best team since their Division II playoff days. If they do, I could see them fighting to break into that top 3, 4, 5. It's a hard conference. I mean, that's part of it. It's such a tough conference. If they don't, I still think with the Tarleton's never been more than just kind of really middle or less, and that's during transition. So I think putting them at the middle would be the bottom. And I think if this is the team that Whitten believes it is, they could be at the top.
They have just as much a chance to be contending right there at the top as anyone else. The other thing is too with this team, I think we're gonna find out how good they are pretty early on. They play Southeastern Louisiana on September 30th. That's gonna be a good test for them in non-conference. Obviously, we talked about Southeastern a few minutes ago as one of the top contenders in the Southland, and so I think this Tarleton team, if everything comes together the right way, like people there around the program are talking about it becoming, this is going to be a team that's going to compete with the SFAs and Eastern Kentuckys and Central Arkansas throughout the course of this season. I think middle, as you said, would be the bottom. I think they're going to be a lot better than that. It just will be interesting to see how they fit into everything. one or two results could easily put them from second to fourth or fifth. But I think, again, they've done some really impressive things the last few years, and building on that is going to be a big deal this season. I think the expectations are very high for good reason there in Stephenville.
Man, I agree with you. And now we move into a conference that used to be known as the SEC of Division II, and it's not quite at that status. It's not as deep. There's not the loss of Tarleton and Commerce has really hurt this conference, but the Lone Star is still a talented conference. It's got some talented teams. I think your favorites at the top, you have to go Angelo State, two-time national quarterfinalist. They're the team to beat. Central Washington is right there with them. We're going to focus on Angelo State for a second, because you're talking about a team that, yes, twice back-to-back years, they have been in national quarterfinals where they lost to Colorado Mines. They get Colorado Mines earlier again this year. By the way, people, Colorado Mines had a coaching change. Okay, Angelo State did not. Now, everybody wants to talk about the 4 All-Americans that Angelo State lost. I understand. Those 4 players are outstanding players. Some of them have gone on to Power 5 programs at North Texas and others. Some ended up at another D2 institution. I do not believe in ragging on college athletes, right? They don't get paid. They don't deserve for me to rag on them. I'm not going to rag on them. But I will say this. Some of those guys that transferred out were really being pushed for their job by other players on the roster. This is a talented, deep roster. The losses that hurt could be along the offensive line and defensive line, but if Jeff Gersh has proven one thing to me, it's that he knows how to recruit those 2 positions. Man, I every time I talk to him, this guy he is bought in, and he has me buying in. There's a lot of people, there's some ASU alums. I know they want to believe it. They want to see it first. I think they're going to see it. I think Angelo State's a team that is the top of the conference. I think they are the champions again this year, and I think they're back there threatening, and this may be the year they take that step into the national finals and hopefully to McKinney in December.
And that would be the perfect thing, right? To be able to play right here in their home state. It's an interesting thing because they went 9-0 in the Lone Star last year. And I really, really think, even with, Cory, you mentioned, they lost some key players, and people have talked a lot about that. But I don't think they've talked enough about the guys that they're bringing back. And I really, really see them going undefeated in the conference again. I know there's some challengers out there, but I just don't see anyone that's going to be at their depth level to be able to compete with them for a full 4 quarters. This is the thing you talk about a lot when you start to look at these matchups is, there's a lot of teams out there that can compete for a half or for 3 quarters, but it's those late game situations, can they hang with them? Do they have enough stamina? And just the depth on this roster is really, really incredible. They've recruited so well, and they haven't just recruited well this summer and gone out and get guys in the portal. They've recruited for the last few years to build up to this, where they have juniors and seniors who are easily able to step into these spots and fill in those roles. And so I think that's why there's a lot of hype around Angelo State this year, is because there is that realistic expectation they could take that step and go all the way to the national title game.
There's a lot of wry smiles. Like, we lost 4. We know. Like we lost 4 All-Americans. It's kind of that wry smile. Like, hey, you just watch out.
Well, and you may use that too to your advantage. People are overlooking you in a way, and for a team like that always seems to have a target on its back, it may help in some situations to be able to have some people who are doubting you a little bit and have a reason to say, you know what, they're not thinking, versus coming in with these high expectations and having to look at it as everyone's, coming after us. You can say, okay, well, there's some doubters out there, and let's go try to prove them wrong.
There were no doubters last year, so Gersh is going to enjoy the fact he can use the doubters with his team this year. No doubt. He is a good coach, and he knows. I bet you he's been telling them that. A team that is probably a little upset at some fan base, some fans listen to this. You might be upset we didn't mention Texas A&M Kingsville as one of the conference favorites. Listen, there is a lot of unknown around this team. What Michael Salinas has done there is a known. He's a great coach. The alum coming back, building that program back. And they won their first 7 games last year, but they lost their last 5. And I think depth, again, we go back to this, but he's only had a couple of years there. His first year was the COVID year. So that doesn't really count. The whole roster has changed. So I think this is really his 3rd year. I think we're another year away from seeing Kingsville having that depth to remain at the top. I think they could be. Health-wise, if things play well, Jacob Cavazos does well at quarterback, they're going to be at the top. I could also see if things break bad, they could end up even at the bottom because I just think depth is such an issue right now for the Javelinas.
Yeah, there's a pretty wide range there that we don't see with all of these teams that we're talking about where, if things break the right way, they could be contending for the conference title, but if they don't, they could be right there at the bottom. But that is certainly the case with a team like this, who we're not entirely sure. There's certainly some question marks, some wild cards there. The one thing is Amos Coleman, obviously preseason defensive player of the year, probably the best defensive player in the conference, at least when you look at defensive backs. He had 5 interceptions last year. I think he can really cause some havoc for opposing offenses. It's going to be important for them to really utilize their defense to their advantage, I think, against some of these explosive offenses within the LSC. I think that's going to be a big key for them if they want to compete for the top. The defense needs to be there every single week.
Oh, I agree. And I think now's a great time to point out that you could catch our interview from Republic of Football with Amos Coleman at the Lone Star Conference Media Days on the Dave Campbell's YouTube channel. And you can also see us there. If you want to just see Riley and Cory talk instead of just listen, hey, YouTube, that's the place to go. Dave Campbell's YouTube page. This will be uploaded there. Now I'm changing this up just a little bit here. I'm going to go to Midwestern State. We're going to my hometown of Wichita Falls. And I'm changing my prediction. Live on air, I'm changing my prediction. I have a lot of concerns for MSU. I'm not exactly sure where to put them, to be quite honest with you. I'm going to say they start in the middle. Middle might be their max this year. I don't know that it's a bottom year, though, Riley. Like, this just seems like one of those years where Bill Maskell works another 5-5 type of season. The biggest issue is at quarterback. Right now they haven't named a starter. There have been a few that have been doing different. I've been at both scrimmages. I've seen different quarterbacks working with the ones. Carson Roper, who was in the spring game, he's one of those guys fighting for it. I'm just not seeing. I'm looking for more decision making from their quarterbacks. I'm looking for more confidence from them. And without a quarterback, you don't go far. They got receiver talent. They've got depth at receiver, but you got to have somebody get the ball to them. The offensive line is smaller. They're really more athletic, and that is a concern for me when you play those teams like an Angelo State, a Central Washington that are big and physical and run the ball. So the size of the offensive line and defensive line is a concern for me. I think the defense is solid. I think they've got some depth back there, secondary question marks. I don't know that I can move MSU anywhere from the middle right now. I don't see someone stepping in, taking over this offense and pushing them to the top just yet.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I trust you too. I think it's one thing to look at things on paper and kind of see how things are lining up. It's another thing to get a live look at them, which you've gotten the chance to do. And that's really valuable to finally see how a team kind of looks in person. It can give you some good indications that you might not get when you're just looking through 2022 stats and just 2023 roster and stuff along those lines. You mentioned another good thing with the O-line is that, they have a good running backs unit, between backs and guys who have proven themselves, have some playing experience, but they're only going to be as good, I think, as that O-line is, because in order to have the consistency in the rushing attack, you need some production to the offensive line to pave those pathways. And if they don't have that, I think it's gonna be some long days there, especially if they can't throw the ball as effectively as they'd probably like to. And the defense can only hold you up so long before you need to score some points. And I think that would be the big concern with MSU right now.
One thing I've seen, they can run the ball. Like you said, they've got running backs. They can run the ball. They can get 3, 4, 5 yards a carry. The problem is if you can't throw the ball, the teams are going to put 9 in the box on you, and you're not getting 3, 4, 5 yards a carry at that point. So that, I really think the key is going to be at quarterback. And I will also let you know that one of the quarterbacks that is battling for the starting position is yet to appear on their roster and does not have any tape after high school. Right. So not saying he's because he's talented. I see talent, but there is that haven't played. What do you have? What do you bring? How are you going to handle up under the pressure and the speed of Division II? I have some concerns. From MSU right there. So now we're going to move over to a couple of teams who have amazing new head coaches. Both of them are really excited about their new head coaches. And I think that they have good reason to be. We're going to start out in the Permian Basin where UTPB has Chris McCullough. The guy is you name the under whatever age you want to name for one of the top coaches, and Chris McCullough is on that list, whether it's under 30, under 35, or under 40. He makes them all. He did a great job at East Central in Oklahoma last year. It was tremendous what he did there, and he brought a lot of that with him, and mainly he brought his quarterback, Kenny Hernzer. Kenny Hernzer is with him, and I'm putting the Falcons to start with at the middle because, again, I said this year I'm all about prove it to me. That seems to be like the theme for me with teams. Prove it to me. You're in the middle. But I do believe UTPB could end up towards the top. They were not without talent. Justin Kerrigan had talent there. The defense had a lot of talent. That defensive talent mainly stayed through the coaching change. So they've got a good defense. You bring a lot of those offensive guys over. They took Texas A&M Kingsville's defensive line coach with them, right? Like they're coming in and they're making some waves, and they plan on letting you know they're serious about competing up there with the Angelo States and Central Washingtons. Are they there? Not yet. Prove it to me. Do I see a scenario they could be? I do. I really do. I think there's a chance.
He didn't only bring his quarterback with him either. He brought East Central's leading rusher with Mary Hardin. Also, Laquan Wells was the top receiver there. There could be a good, quarterback receiver combo there with Hernsier and Wells. So yeah, there's a lot to like on that offense. They're going to score points. I think that's going to be a given. I want to see how the defense looks, if they can really keep the opponent off the board. They're going to need to maximize their offensive possessions, I think, if they want to have success. But I totally think finishing above 500, maybe a 6-7 win season. 6 wins seems more ideal and more realistic. I think that's certainly in the cards if things break the right way for them. And these transfers who again, played under Chris McCullough can come in and immediately step into those roles and fit within the system, which I think they will. But time will tell with that aspect of things.
Time to head out west to the Buffaloes of West Texas A&M. They have a gorgeous stadium. They've got Bain Schaefer Stadium right there. They have got all the facilities. They've got everything you need. Things didn't break well for Hunter Hughes last year. Things went south in a hurry towards the end of the season. We got a new head coach in Josh Lynn, and let me tell you, he has brought excitement. He has brought belief. He has brought hope. He's also brought realism. For a fan base, I'm kudos to the Buffs fans. You understand that Josh Lynn's not just going to come in and take you to the top right away. But I do think middle of the Lone Star Conference, maybe even upper middle of the Lone Star Conference, is very possible, because we've seen Josh Lynn. He coached at Eastern New Mexico, Nebraska Kearney. He's been around. We know what he can do. He's going to go a guy who's triple option concepts. He ran the triple option flex bone at Eastern. He is 50-50 run pass. And it's going to look different, but the offensive line, the concepts of it are still the same. And I think that's going to lead to a good year, a solid year for West Texas. And I think that's going to start building that momentum for a team that Lynn makes no bones about it, Riley. He's there to make them consistently a top 10 team every year.
Yeah, and I think you certainly have to like those expectations and goal, especially with a first-year head coach. You brought up, I mean, they have a fantastic stadium. I actually haven't ever gotten the chance to go up there for a game, but from what I've seen and talking to people who have, I mean, it's a great place to recruit to, right? Like it's rural, but the fan base around there, the stadium, it's really going to be a good place that I think they can bring in some transfers. They can bring in some talented high school players. And I think in future, that'll really serve them well. For the, here and now, I think, they open with a tough matchup. Western Colorado is not going to be an easy opponent. But, the experience and the talent, the roster is there. Some key guys come back defensively. This seems to me like a really solid middle team. I don't know if they're ready to make that jump to the top at all. But I think in the future, if they can start to lay that foundation this year, things could start to go more towards the point where we're talking again about them contending for the Lone Star title like we were a few years back.
JT Cavender. He is an amazing linebacker. He is incredibly fun to watch, and he is back after his elbow injury that ended his season last year. But the one that raised my eyebrows a little bit, and I said, okay, Josh Lynn he's coming in to do this, right? Was Noah Bogardus. He had entered the portal. He recruited Noah to stay, and Noah's happy, and the team is pretty happy because Noah is a dynamic wide receiver. They're going to get the ball into his hands. They're going to have more of a passing attack. You're going to see some focus on that. You said it's rural, and I love that because it is, but it's not. Right, it is if you're in Canyon, it feels that way, but you're only just miles from Amarillo, which has everything you need. So when you look at what the recipe, the facilities that they have, the stadium you get to play in, and then if you got people that like the small town feel, we got Canyon. Right. If you like the big town feel, you're not far from Amarillo. You could go up there. You could get that mix of guys. They have everything they need. It's a matter of putting it all together, and I'm with you, man. I think Josh Lynn is that guy that's going to put it together. It's just going to take him a couple of years. And hey, man, it's time. We're heading into Riley's area of expertise here. We're going to the American Southwest Conference, and no, we are not talking realignment. Okay, that will be a different episode. It will come at some point later. We are not getting into all that right now. Go to texasfootball.com, truetothecrew.com. You'll catch up on what's happened in realignment over the last few years. But we still have a big conference this year, Riley, and the favorite begins and ends with Mary Hardin-Baylor, and I really don't know that I want to put Hardin-Simmons in there with it. I just don't know. I think Mary Hardin-Baylor is by far and away the favorite to win the auto bid for the ASC this year.
Yeah, and I think you look and you see teams that are consistent year after year. Obviously, a lot of the talk is UMHB losing Kyle King, who is one of the best quarterbacks in program history, losing guys like KJ Miller and Brandon Jordan on the receiving front, Alfonso Thomas, their talented running back, and it lost a lot, especially on the offensive end, Tommy Bowden on the defensive end. But they always replace that with talent, and there's guys who are coming up. And yes, there are some question marks, but I think they'll have those figured out. Hardin-Simmons is tough too, because they did lose some guys. And, last year, obviously, it seemed like it was a little bit closer maybe than this year. And so I think that's part of where that, where you're coming from, where I'm kind of coming from, is that, Hardin-Simmons certainly can compete, but I don't know if they're on that level. But again, it's tough to know right now because there is a lot of unknowns with both of these teams. who are consistently at the top of the conference. And so we really got to have to wait and see how the season openers go for both UMHB and Hardin-Simmons before I think making an official assessment.
Now, last year, for anyone who might remember, I created just a tad bit of a stir when I picked Hardin-Simmons to beat Mary Hardin-Baylor. I was wrong last year. I'm not doing it this year. And I'm not saying it's possible, but I am going to go back to the game when they played each other last year. And if Hardin-Simmons can ever catch the breaks, like last year, it was self-inflicted / crew-inflicted right at the end of the first half, a couple of turnovers. Crew did exactly what you're supposed to. UMHB took advantage of it, scored touchdowns, blew the game wide open. It was over there. Hardin-Simmons can't let that happen. They've got to create a couple of those turnovers. And that's why I put UMHB as the favorite. Plus, we're breaking down categories. National title favorite is UMHB. I don't put Hardin-Simmons at a national title favorite right now until they show prove it to me, right? They got to prove to me that they are that kind. But as we talk about them, and I've talked with Jesse Burleson quite often during the offseason, he thinks they've got a really solid team, and I think so too. They've got an offensive line. There's been some changes on the offensive line. I think if you want to point to a question mark, some of that could be there. But he's an offensive line coach, so I'm not really too concerned about the offensive line. They got their quarterback back. They got the running back back. They have a lot of defense. They're missing a few spots, maybe a wide receiver here and there, but they still are a team that not only are at the top of the American Southwest, they're a team that if they create those breaks against Mary Hardin-Baylor, they could pull that surprise, and they're back at home this year.
Well, and that's the thing. They're playing in Abilene for that game. But more importantly, Jesse Burleson did a press conference last week, I believe. And one of the things he was asked about was the offensive line. He said, a lot of the guys that will be seeing significant playing time this year starting on that line came in last year as freshmen, not really expecting to see the field much. And because of injuries and other things, ended up getting on the field and taking a lot of snaps. And so while it does look young with several sophomores and guys on that line, there is experience there. They got their reps in last year as freshmen, which, is tough to do. Making that transition from high school to college is very, very tough. If there's a spot for me that I think there's some concern, it's at wide receiver. But I'll tell you, their running backs unit comes back. Miles Featherston and Colton Marshall might be the best 1-2 punch, of any backfield in the ASC. They just are fantastic. They complement each other. They have different skill sets slightly, but both kind of work together to get the job done. And it's nice to have that depth when you have two very quality running backs who, if we're being honest, either one of them goes somewhere else, both will be starting, if they weren't at the same school. And so at the end of the day, it's not as much about the reps for them. I think as much as just contributing to that offense. So there's a lot to like about the Hardin-Simmons, offensive front, but also defensively. Bringing back a guy like Matt Mitchell is invaluable. The experience he has. So yeah, it'll be an interesting year in the ASC, I think, with teams like that and some wild cards certainly at the top.
If the running backs hang on to the ball. That was a problem against
That
Mary
was a problem
Hardin-Baylor
last year, yeah.
That was a problem. So they're going to have to hang on to the ball. We're going to run through the rest of the conference here pretty quickly. Austin College, new head coach, Tony Joe White comes over from Birmingham Southern. Riley, I think he is a great coach. I think that Austin College will become a team that as they move into the Southern Collegiate Athletic Conference next year, that's going to help them. But they're a few years away. But they got the right guy. But this year, I think they're going to be at the bottom of the conference.
Agreed. I think last year they pulled off the upset of ETBU. Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot to cheer about from that side of things. But Coach Joe White did a great job building the program at Birmingham Southern. He knows Texas well. He can recruit here. I think Austin College is a few years away. Obviously, going to a new conference is going to help. But for this year, I think they stay competitive in games. I don't think their record reflects that in the way that maybe it should.
I agree. You mentioned the Tigers. We're heading out to Marshall, Texas, where East Texas Baptist has a new head coach, Calvin Ruzicka, who, by the way, is from the Joey McGuire coaching tree and reminds me a lot, that personality. He is dynamic. He is a good person. He is great, fun to talk to. And I think he's a good head coach. I just feel like the Tigers that there still needs some talent. I felt the talent went back the last few years under Brian Maper. I think Calvin is going to need a couple of years to build that back up. I think we see the Tigers in the middle of, I see them at the middle. But if things are a little better than I think they are, which honestly they very well could be, I could see ETBU being up there above Howard Payne and competing with Hardin-Simmons again.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's going to be something we see this year necessarily. We'll see. Time will tell. But I think the big thing last year, they were so good defensively. They were top 3, or they were third, best in the ACC against the pass, second best against the run. The defense was there, and that was why we thought, several of us, that ETBU would be competitive with Howard Payne, and I certainly think that's the expectation again this year. Last year, it just didn't work for them, especially offensively. They couldn't really move the ball enough to generate points, and that's what ultimately hurt them. The defense played pretty well, but couldn't hold up. The depth maybe lacked a little bit there, but yeah, I think there's a lot to like about the new coaching change and what Calvin Ruzicka has brought to the program. He's enthusiastic, he's excited about the future, and if you're an ETBU fan, the optimism is certainly here in the next couple of years because they're building this back.
They are, and they love Coach Rue, and we all love Coach Rue. He is fun to talk to. You mentioned the Yellow Jackets. We go to Brownwood with Howard Payne, and they also had a coaching change. Oh, real quick on the ETBU, the defense you mentioned that was so good. That was Coach Rue. He was defensive coordinator.
He was the defensive coordinator. Yeah.
Speaking of defensive coordinators, over in Brownwood, Kevin Bachtel is now the head coach, taking over for his brother Jason Bachtel, and they are 2 separate head coaches. I just want to make that clear right now. This is not. It's a transition. There is a part of this that's a transition, and they are 2 separate guys. Jason moved on. He's now offensive coordinator at Houston Christian with Braxton Harris, a great hire, by the way. You want an offensive mind. But what Kevin's done with that defense at Howard Payne is just incredible. He's been outstanding with it. I still see them at the top of the conference. I don't know. I'm not going to put them at beating a Hardin-Simmons yet. I could put them challenging a Hardin-Simmons and giving Mary Hardin-Baylor some trouble at times.
Landon McKinney might be the best quarterback they've had here within the last decade or 2. He's just so dynamic when it comes to throwing the football. They need to take advantage of having him for one more year. And I think that's why if there's a year, especially offensively, this is the year. Now, obviously, they lose Otis Lanier, who was so good in the receiving game. But there's a lot to like about what they bring back. I know Kevin Bachtel said the other day that he feels like they're a little bit further ahead than maybe he even expected they would. They scrimmaged Cisco last week, and apparently that went pretty well. So yeah, I think Howard Payne could certainly pull off the upset. There's always that chance with this team. They're good, they're competitive, they work really, really hard, and they want to win. And they're going to be playing Hardin-Simmons September 30th in the AAC opener. So that'll be a game to be paying attention to in Abilene.
Oh, I'll be watching that one. I will have that on, no doubt, at least following along if I'm on the road somewhere else. We head back to Abilene to McMurray, and the Warhawks had a down year last year. I expected a little more from Jordan Neal. But let me tell you, Riley, there's always things that we just don't know, right? That we find out later. This roster went through a change when Jordan Neal arrived. They had a complete redo of the roster. I think he had about 40 guys left. Well, he only had like 40 left after COVID. COVID completely ravaged the Warhawks roster. It took some time to rebuild. Jordan thinks this year they're a little better. I'm still putting them at the bottom, but I do actually see a way that they are back up in the middle and very respectable in the conference again.
Yeah, I think last year felt very uncharacteristic for McMurray because Jordan Neal has been around that program so long and done so much for the Warhawks year in year out. They've always been kind of one of those middle tier teams. I think the SCAC will fit them well. I think they will be competitive in future years, and I'm sure that's exciting for everyone around that program. They got one more year in the ASC, and I think they want to make the most of it. You look at some of the matchups they have. There's some winnable games on that schedule, especially in conference play, where I can totally see them in the middle. One thing that I will point out, I only see 4 quarterbacks on the roster right now. Don't see either one of the guys who took the majority of the snaps last year. So that'll be something to be paying attention to, and the way that the quarterback situation plays out for the Warhawks in Abilene.
I think quarterback was one of the issues last year too. They didn't necessarily receive the best quarterback play. And as always, there could be a couple that are not on the roster yet. That happens here.
Exactly.
Rosters don't get complete until right at week 1. A roster that went a complete redo last year, had a very successful turnaround season. So Ross, and they're in their last year Division III before they head to the Lone Star Conference in Division II. Coach Barry Derrickson did a great job last year with them. They return a lot, they lose a lot. I'm starting them in the middle, and I'm making another change here. I'm not putting them, I don't think they're going to make it near the top. I think they're pretty much a middle ASC team as they finish out their Division III tenure.
I would agree, and certainly was glad to see that they improved a little bit last year. That's a tough place to recruit to. Alpine might be one of the toughest jobs that anyone can take, especially within the state of Texas when it comes to college coaching. So he's done a really good job there, and I'm glad to see that. But I do think that they're going to be very much a middle-tier team. I don't see them reaching the level of Howard Payne, UMHB Hardin-Simmons this year. They do bring back some talent receiver. So I think they can get, again, quarterback situation. If they can figure that out, get a reliable quarterback in there and get the ball to some of those receivers, they can have some success. But they're going to be playing a mix of D2 and D3 teams. So record-wise, it might be a little interesting as far as their overall record and within ASC play. Probably a middle-tier team for now.
We move on to Texas Lutheran and Coach Neil LaHue. I'm just going to tell you right now, Riley, I don't know what to think. I really, honestly, I don't know what to think of the Bulldogs this year. I think they could be okay. I think they might not be okay. I don't really know. I don't have a good read on the Bulldogs. What's your take on TLU?
Yeah, this is kind of the way I've felt about them for a couple of years now, is that there's games where it looks like they're the favorite and they don't end up pulling it out. They lost a couple of close games last year, but then there's games where they end up winning. And one of the things that I do remember seeing from them is that their offense is very efficient. And Seth Cosme, the quarterback, comes back. He's very experienced. He knows how to run the offense. They have flashes of success. One of the things that they've done a lot to beat teams offensively is they rely a lot on screen passes, or at least they have been in past years, and it's short passing, moving the ball upfield consistent rate. And that's led to success. That's one of the things that I think if they're going to win some games this year in the ASC and stick in the middle of the conference, I think middle of the conference, I don't think they're a bottom tier team, in my opinion. I think they're a middle tier team. They're going to need to move the ball, but they're also going to need to play quality defense. I think it's where they were hurt a lot last year. They could put points on the board, but then they'd allow too many, or they wouldn't score enough offensively. So, they need to kind of get the offense and defense on the same page a little bit more, I think. And, admittedly, I haven't seen them in person yet. I know they're scrimmaging Trinity, I believe, here in a week or so, but we'll see. We'll see what to expect from the Bulldogs down in Seguin.
They are scrimmaging Trinity this weekend here, because we are that close to the start of the regular season, and we move into the Southern Athletic Association. And I put a second team as a favorite just in case Trinity stumbles, because Trinity, in my book, is by far the odds-on favorite. But if they were to stumble, I would give Barry the team that's maybe there to take advantage. But the Tigers, Riley, they are national title contenders. And I mean that. I'm not going to go quite with putting Trinity ahead of UMHB in the poll, as some did, and I can understand why. And I think the coaches at UMHB would go, yeah, okay, well, whatever, right? But would use it. They play UMHB week 2. That could be a preview to a playoff game. Also could determine home field. It sounds very weird to say, but week 2 could be a game that determines which team from Texas makes it to a national title.
Yeah, if you're looking for a game to go to on September 9th, get down to San Antonio, because that's going to be a huge game. And the other thing is both teams, Mary Hardin-Baylor and Trinity, open the year with some really tough matchups. I mean, you look, and Trinity's going up to St. John's, who is one of the historic programs in Division III. UMHB is going to play River Falls, Wisconsin River Falls, one of the top offenses in the WIAC. So both these teams will be coming off really tough games. It's going to create for an interesting matchup. But as far as Trinity specifically, what Jeremy Urban has done down there is just been incredible. I mean, you looked at in 2021, they made their run, barely got into the playoffs with a couple of close wins, almost shocked UMHB and Belton in the first round. Last year, they beat Hardin-Simmons in the first round, lose to UMHB in the second round. They've been right there, and they've been fantastic year after year. Tucker Horn comes back at quarterback, and he is, again, a fantastic playmaker, a guy who you're going to want to keep your eye on because, again, I think he's a contender for National Player of the Year. Things go the right way for Trinity. He can throw the ball so effectively. BJ Stewart comes back there, and it gives him a reliable option at receiver. They have Caleb Harmel on the defensive end. Everything seems to be clicking for Trinity this year. They got the experience on the roster. They got some of those fifth-year guys. This is the year, I think, if Trinity's going to make a run, it's going to be in 2023.
The pressure is there because this is the year it has to happen. In the years past, there was always, we have next year. You don't have next year. And I think that urgency might be something that pushes them, or that urgency can knock you down. We will see that as the season goes along. And pretty sure Riley's going to be there on September 9th. I know I will be there on September 9th. We are not missing UMHB Trinity in week 2. Another team left the American Southwest and is now in the SAA, and that's Southwestern. I think it was a great move for them to go over to the SAA. I think they fit well in there. And I think Joe Austin is going to have a team that they have a quarterback back. They have a linebacker back. They're brothers, by the way, those two. And I just see Southwestern fitting in so well. They could be middle of the SAA. And I mean, in a couple of years with recruiting, with having been in a conference that's not against national powerhouses all the time with Hardin-Simmons and Mary Hardin-Baylor, I think he's building in the right direction for a couple of years to get towards the top of the SAA. Yeah,
they traded a conference with two powerhouses for one, going from UMHB and Hardin-Simmons to just Trinity. But after Trinity, there's a lot of room there in the SAA to really make a run. And they get both Trinity and Barry at home this year. That'll be a plus for them. There's some playmakers there on both sides of the ball. When you start to look and see, okay, who's actually coming back for some of these teams, can really give you a good indication of what it might look like. It's been hard the last few years because Southwestern has won some games. They've been a little bit inconsistent, but part of that has been just the talent within the ASC. And not saying the SAA doesn't have the same level of talent, but I think Southwestern's been building. I think some of that has been overshadowed by the result from the field against the UMHBs and Hardin-Simmons. When you get into the SAA, a new conference, new atmosphere, we could see Southwestern really improve on last season. And I think with some of the key pieces they have coming back, there's certainly potential for them to be top 4 in the SAA at the end of this year.
I think so. And like you said, the SAA, there is really something to be said about aligning with a conference where the teams you play against are similar in focus on both academics and athletics. And I think that's where they're at. And I think Southwestern athletic programs as a whole, through the whole department, is going to benefit from this move to the SAA. We move into the Sooner Athletic Conference, NAIA, and we have teams to talk about here, Riley. We have a really good team. They're one of the conference favorites, Texas Wesleyan, and they're Ottawa, Arizona. All right, that team, Mike Nesbitt, former head coach at West Texas A&M, well known in Texas. He's the coach at Ottawa, Arizona. He has built that program into something that is they're tough. They're tough to beat, a playoff contender. And you want to know something else? The Rams are a playoff contender. Joe Prudhomme at Texas Wesleyan has done a fantastic job. And now they move home. They're building a stadium on campus. It's going to be a few years away still. They're playing at Crowley ISD. That's soon to be announced. They're going to be playing at Crowley ISD for their home games this year. I think that right there, combined with just the talent, man. Prudhomme has got some talent. They got a lot back. They were close last year. They feel like they should have been a playoff team. They have a very, very tough schedule, but very winnable. This is a team I could see going undefeated and into the playoffs in the regular season if they're able to win a couple of close games late.
Well, that's the question. How much did losing out on that playoff bid really motivate them over the course of this offseason? They get Ottawa in the season opener, which will be an interesting matchup right out of the gate. Can debate whether it's best to play your top conference rivals right out of the gate or late in the season. I know coaches who would take both approaches. But yeah, you look, the offense should be really, really good again. I mean, you look in guys coming back like Ernest Caesar and you know, just so many pieces of this team that were there last year are going to remember how close they were and that they were right there knocking on the door. And I think this year we could certainly see an undefeated season from Texas Wesleyan, which would really, really, I think, give them some momentum heading into the playoffs. It's one of those things when you get rolling, you can go however far, you know, your momentum allows you to go. So I think Texas Wesleyan could be in for a really, really big year this year with just some of the pieces they have coming back, and certainly a positive for a program that feels like it's been building towards this for several years now.
Well, it has. They rebirthed football in, I want to say 2017 or 2018.
Right. Which is impressive for a newer program.
Yes. I mean, look at UT Permian Basin. They also started their program maybe a couple of years even before that still. And yet what Texas Wesleyan has done to build the depth needed to get to this level. That's the thing that I'm most impressed with. Joe Prudhomme is doing a great job, and I am all about being in Fort Worth for a playoff game in November in the NAIA. Some other teams, SAGU, Southwestern Assemblies of God, they're starting their second season under former Dallas Cowboy Greg Ellis. Ellis is a defensive guy. He came in and turned that defense around right away last year. After spending a year at Texas College, he's got a whole nother season. He doesn't have Keaton Dudek back. He lost his running back. That's a problem. I'm putting SAGU in that middle, but hey, look, Greg Ellis showed last year. Don't doubt him. They could be towards the top as well.
Yeah, and we're starting to see a lot of great defensive minds are really leading their teams to a lot of success as head coaches, especially across the state of Texas. But yeah, SAGU opens their season, I believe, against Howard Payne in Brownwood. Again, not an NAIA matchup for them, but it'll be a good indication of where they're at, because we just talked about Howard Payne and how good Howard Payne's going to be. Obviously, once they get into that, that schedule and into conference play, I think there's a lot of optimism around this program for good reason. We saw what they could do last year. Now, with the foundation set up a little bit more, I think there's potential to go on a little bit of a winning streak, especially as you get into the middle portion of that conference slate.
Texas College, man, Tyler, Jarrell Jackson, what he is doing out there with the Steers is, it's God's work, man. This guy has taken over a program that was just absolutely devastated during COVID. Greg Ellis had it for a year. It's a tough place. It's a tough program, but he is turning that. He is turning that program slowly. We're not seeing it this year. The Steers are likely to be bottom again, but they're better. That roster's gone from 40-something players to over 100 players. You get more talent, you get more competition. Poor guy had to go searching for a defensive coordinator just a couple of weeks ago because of something that happened to the other defensive coordinators in the family, an illness. Just devastating, right? But he didn't care. He's got another one in place. the Steers are a team that, yeah, they're at the bottom, but man, I finally have hope for Texas College for the future.
Yeah, and he's really just taken over a lot of different roles. Head baseball coach this past spring. He's willing to be there for this entire athletics department, and I think that's really notable. It's tough when you're in some of these spots where a lot of programs have been like this over the years, but where it's just really, really tough to win. There isn't that precedent for success, but I think he definitely has a vision and a goal for this program where he wants to take it, and he's putting the right coaches in place to start to begin that process. So yeah, keep an eye on Texas College for the next few years. It's going to be a slow rebuild and slow build up, but I think we could see them competing within the conference here in a couple of years when they finally can get some of these recruiting classes together and start to build a little bit more within that program.
Look, the key is scholarships. They had no athletic scholarships for years at Texas College, and now he's gone out and got some partnerships and some sponsors, and they're able to use that money for scholarships. And then on top of it, he got an equipment sponsor that's giving them jerseys and everything else. Like, he is doing the things that the players are going to go, coach is putting in the effort, we're going to put in the effort. I'm with you on the Steers. Another team in Texas with another new head coach. Another theme of this offseason was head coaches. That's Wayland Baptist, and they have Marcos Hinojos Sr. The guy is here's the expectation. All right. I'm going to say I'm starting him at the bottom and prove it to me. Like I've been saying this whole podcast, prove it to me. But I'm going to tell you what he has told me to expect. He said he will be disappointed if they're not right around 500 this year. And for Wayland Baptist, I can see that happening. I could see them being in the middle. I need them to prove it to me, but I think they've got the right man to lead that team right now.
Yeah, I'd agree. He definitely brings in some good expectations. And it's important, I think, to set those expectations, especially for a team that comes off a 2-8 year. Last year, I mean, it just felt like their offense wasn't scoring enough. I think they averaged about 21 points per game. In fairness, they didn't get a lot of opportunities to do that. I felt like in a lot of those games, they just weren't able to really get as many possessions as they probably needed to stay in those games. The defense allowed 42 points per game, right around there. So the defense is really going to need to step up. And I think that's going to be the key. If they have a good defense that can contain teams, I think the offense is going to be able to be there. I think they do have some talent across the board within that group on that side of the ball. But if they just need to keep teams off the board, and it doesn't have to be shutouts, just under 20, under 30 points. And they might be able to hang in some more of these games that they lost last year just because it was, other teams ran away from them by putting together a few really, really good offensive possessions.
Some would also argue that the offense didn't produce enough too, like you said in the beginning, right?
Exactly.
Like it was a team effort. The whole team didn't do well last year. And that's why Butch Henderson is out. And that's why Marcos Hinojos Sr. is in. But he was also defensive coordinator last year. So he got to see that from the inside. And he truly believes that the culture around that program has already changed. And he's already seeing it move in the right direction. And for a guy who's around it every day, look, I think that's great. I think we're going to see better play out of the defense. I think we're going to see better play out of the offense. And hopefully they end up in the middle like they said they would. Well, Riley, we get down to the last but not the least conference, Southwest Junior College Football Conference. You want to know one that could produce a national champion every year? That's this conference. Also one that I have no idea who's going to win this conference every single year. Favorites this year, I'm going New Mexico Military. You won the national title 2 years ago. You're a conference favorite 2 years later. Trinity Valley, every year, conference favorite. Kilgore, Willie Gooden does amazing things out there with the Rangers. They are also a conference favorite. But there's some teams even to watch out here. You've got Blinn. Blinn, the home of – they're tired of being known as the place where Cam Newton just went to school. Ryan Mahan is ready to take that team to the next level. And other coaches around have said he's got a lot of talent. If he can maintain it, this is the problem with JUCO, man. They get the talent. They have spring ball. FBS and all these college coaches come and watch their spring practices and then take their kids before they get to the summer session. So it's so tough. And so you go with the coaches that have tended to done it over and over again. Blinn is one of those. We know Ryan can. He could put them up there. I'm putting them middle to top this year. What are your thoughts? I want to kind of get your thought. Kilgore, I've got them at the top. Trinity Valley, I have them at the top as well. Interested your thoughts on those three there, Riley.
Yeah, and I would just note real quick that I have a ton of respect for junior college coaches across the board, whatever sport it might be, because they're in this position where they're always having to recruit, even if bigger schools aren't coming and taking people off their roster like you talked about right before. It certainly does happen like that. Just the fact that they're dealing with 2-year players, and it's constantly you're trying to build, but then people are leaving because they're at the junior college hoping to get opportunity at a bigger school, at a 4-year school. So they're going to go if they get the opportunity. So you're always recruiting, and it's just a tough thing because you have trouble kind of putting together teams where you have a bunch of returners coming back. So yeah, I think my thought on a team like Trinity Valley is I like their offense. I like what they're going to be able to do on that side of the ball. You mentioned they're a contender every year. I think it'd be foolish to say anything otherwise because they've certainly established themselves enough. When you look at a team like Blinn, I see them being closer to a middle tier team. But again, some of those pieces, I haven't seen a good roster yet to really give an indication of how much return talent they have. But I think Blinn is certainly there. They can bring back some of those guys who were freshmen last year and who stepped up. Kilgore, what they were able to do last year, I think it could really parlay into some more success this year. You mentioned, it's tough to live when you have a good player like Cam Newton come in, it's tough to escape that image a little bit, but they have guys who are establishing themselves here and who are going on to bigger and better things at these FBS schools. And so, yeah, I think, Trinity Valley, to me though, I continue to go back to them because to me, they are the favorite to win this conference. I don't know if it's far and away because I think there's certainly some teams that would disagree with me on that front. But I think if you're looking for a team to put your money on to go deep in the postseason, it's going to be Trinity Valley this year.
Nobody wins this conference with less than 2 losses.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. But that doesn't knock you out of a chance for a national title in JUCO either. And I think that is also important. And this is also the point of where I will say multiple times, if you've ever listened to me, you heard it, you're going to hear it many times again. JUCO is the best football, is the closest level of football to FBS that we have in the non-FBS. The talent is there. And by that, go look at some of these teams' pages on Twitter, and you will see exactly how many people they retweet that are playing in the NFL that were at these JUCOs. The talent is unreal, and those teams have it. Navarro's a team that has had it too. Navarro, they got Dane Gents, right? Yeah. He's pretty well known at Grandview. He did pretty well if you like state championships and stuff. I'm a little interested. The Bulldogs are so up and down and so inconsistent. I've still got them kind of being inconsistent this year in the middle. Another team, Tyler Jacobson out there, or Tyler Junior College with Jacobson as the coach there. This team's incredible. And the Apaches are going to be tough to beat. They have offensive linemen that are some of them are off to the FBS colleges. Others will be after this year. As long as they can, some of them are grades, some of them are not. Another thing too, it's not always grades with JUCO, especially during the transfer portal. And they're used to that, by the way. They don't want to hear your complaint about the transfer portal. They deal with that all the time. But they also have used that portal to go get some of these high school kids that are fringe FBS prospects and turn them into it. So maybe that's something that some of the other colleges could use is kind of get with some of those JUCO colleges and figure some things out. Again, I digressed on that one. Back to the Apaches. I've got them at the middle. Things turn right. They stay healthy. They go to the top. Navarro middle. But again, man, I can't take them out of the top. I don't. There's only one team on this I could take out of the top spot, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I agree with that. The other thing too with junior college, which you often find is that you're not going to know how good some of these freshmen are going to be. And then they end up just going off for a fantastic year, and they're one of the best players in the conference. So it's hard to know sometimes who some of these breakout stars are going to be and who's actually making up these rosters, because every year it seems like we find a guy who's like, he kind of a diamond in the rough type player who ends up going off to an FBS school and having a lot of success. But yeah, I would agree with you on that. Navarro's just been, the inconsistency is tough, I think, to project. I think it makes it tough because you don't have a good baseline to say, okay, this is what they've done. But yeah, I mean, you go through and you start to say, okay, well, like a team like Tyler, yeah, if things break the right way, they certainly have the talent on that roster to finish and win that title. Tyler is the one for me that I think out of those two, Navarro and Tyler, I think Tyler has the best shot to go make that run at the top of the league.
We got one team left. Hey, just think of this real quick, Riley. In a couple of years, it's going to be 26 teams when UTRGV gets added, and then we get Shriner. We're going to have 36 teams, which is even
36.
better, right? Because what's better than 34 is 36. We're going to finish with the Cisco Wranglers, and this is a team that you and I are a little familiar with. This head coach. They got Stephen Lee. He was the offensive coordinator at Mary Hardin-Baylor. When he got there is when they started winning some of these national titles in recent years. He went to Abilene Christian for a year. He is now the head coach at Cisco. It's going to take him some time. Cisco is a program. They had a couple of transitions here recently. I believe he's the third head coach in the last 3 years. There's been a lot of that. Give him a couple of years, because he's a guy that I think once he figures it out, he knows football. Once he figures out this kind of JUCO and gets that roster built, they're going to start threatening some of those teams at the top of the conference as well.
Well, just look at that 2021 UMHB offense. I mean, how good they were, how effective they were. They blew out North Central in the national title game. Yeah, he knows how to, especially not just offensively, though that's kind of been his specialty, but he just knows how to recruit well and how to bring in talented players, and then how to make everyone kind of fit together. That UMHB offense in 2021 was very cohesive. I think that's one of the things that led to their championship success. Yeah, if he can get things going in the right direction at Cisco, start to establish some consistency, we could see them kind of establishing themselves within the top of this league.
I have Cisco at the bottom, but they're not going to be there for long, in my opinion, either. Riley, we did it, man. You survived the mega preview episode. And I think we've gotten this done in under 2 hours, which is quite incredible with me, because I have a tendency to go off script. So thank you, sir, for joining us this year. Looking forward to it, man. We're going to have a great year on this podcast.
We will. It's going to be fun to talk about. There's a lot of games I'm already super excited about. Yeah, it's finally football season. College football's back, and it's the best time of the year. So yeah, I can't wait for more of these podcasts the next few months.
Well, we're going to be back next week. That will be our next episode. We're going to change it up. Instead of reviews, we're going to do more previews. I think just myself, I believe that people are more interested in what's coming up. By Monday, they've already moved on from what happened over the weekend. So we're going to focus more on the later in the week kind of a podcast show with a preview and go that route. I think that's best.
Sounds like a plan. No, there's going to be a lot to preview. Certainly some exciting games coming up week 1.
We have a big slate coming up week 1, week 2, and week 3 this year, and it's only going to get better. We want to thank you also to the listeners and the viewers. If you're watching us on the YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. Until we meet again, stay safe.